Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, a storied unit from World War II finally gets some much-deserved credit. Learn about the shadowy Ghost Army being recognized at the U.S. Capitol. And U.S. troops practice urban warfare with the aid of robotic systems. Have a look at what the fight of the future might look like. Also, the military is after more laser spur units to defend against a variety of attacks. Hear from a top general about why the U.S. needs more directed energy weapons. Plus, a historic battleship heads to dry dock for repair. Get the latest on the USS New Jersey. Finally, Danish crews train Ukrainian pilots in F-16s. See the latest from NATO's effort to aid in the war against Russia. It's the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, here on Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Andrea Scott. One of the unsung units of World War II wasn't an elite group of special forces troops raiding supply lines. It was a creative group of misinformation artists tasked with misleading the Germans. Known as the Ghost Army, this group used inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, and even made-up generals to confuse Axis intelligence and make the Allied forces seem more expansive than they actually were. But much of that work went unheralded, until now. Pat Hansen brings us the story.
Conventional warfare drives the narrative that battles are won by firepower, and wars are triumphed by troops. And while that may often be the case, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops of World War II showed that engineering, ingenuity, and a dash of showmanship can be strong tactical tools as well. The 23rd came to be known as the Ghost Army, the first multimedia tactical deception unit in the Army's history. Activated on January 20th of 1944, the unit was made up of 82 officers and 1,023 men under the command of Colonel Harry L. Reeder. The highly secretive force had a strange mission: make the Germans believe their tiny unit was actually 2 whole divisions of troops in order to confuse the enemy about Allied strength. That meant making around 1,000 men look like approximately 30,000. How did they do it? With the use of inflatable tanks, fake radio traffic, sound effects, and even fabricated generals. First deployed 2 weeks after D-Day, the crew completed 22 deceptive missions in all, and is credited with saving between 15 and 30,000 lives by misdirecting the Germans. Their culminating act came on March 18th of 1945, when the 1,100-man crew deceived German intelligence about the site and timing of the U.S. 9th Army's Rhine River crossing. The actions of this heroic and theatrical unit were kept classified until 1996, in case similar tactics were employed in the Cold War. But the Ghost Army finally got some much-deserved recognition on Capitol Hill recently, being awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. And we stopped in to get a look at the ceremony.
The Congressional Gold Medal is the highest honor that this body can bestow upon any group or individual. And today, pursuant to S. 1404, we are here to award that medal to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops and the 3133rd Signal Services Company, otherwise known as the Ghost Army.
Soldiers recruited for the Ghost Army were not only men of muscle, but they were also men of the mind.
The members of the Ghost Army were artists, architects, actors, radio broadcasters, fashion designers, engineers, lawyers, and more.
Using inflatable tanks and sonic deception,
these soldiers successfully diverted enemy resources, and as we have heard today,
they were responsible for saving tens of thousands of lives.
I want to thank everybody in my life. You've all contributed to my existence and to my being who I am.
I want to thank the people who lobbied for this bill. Many of them are in this room. You fought for this in person, by phone, by email, by Zoom. You worked hard for years to make this happen, and you deserve our deepest gratitude.
Well, it feels good to get the recognition, but it took 79 years. Yeah, it felt good finally. It's a shame that they couldn't have it sooner because there's a lot of other guys would have liked to have been here.
I came across this story 19 years ago. I was blown away by it, which is why I made a documentary and book about it. And they weren't honored officially during the war, and I thought they really deserved an honor. And so we started looking around in 2014, 2015, how can we honor these guys? And then I kind of realized that the Congressional Medal of Honor was something we could, it was an avenue we could take, and we could try to see if we could get the recognition. And so that's kind of how we got started and why we approached that.
I mean, what does anybody want to remember about the war? It was a bad thing. There was a lot of bad things happened, and we got credit for what we did. We did our job, and that was it.
I've become very close to these guys. I love Seymour and Bernie and John. I have spent a lot of time talking, especially to Seymour and Bernie, on the phone, visiting with them. We honored each of them in their home community, and I'm very, very close to them. And I'm so thrilled that these three guys could be here on behalf of all their fellow soldiers in the 23rd and receive this honor today. They wielded creativity and imagination on the battlefield. They saved thousands of lives. I met a guy once who was a tanker under Patton, and he came up to me after a screening and he said, I was a tanker under Patton at Metz, and he said, I never heard of the Ghost Army, but I just watched your film, and I think this unit might have saved my life. And we talk all the time about the people whose lives were saved, but here was a guy who said his life might have been one of them, and he was showing me pictures of his children and grandchildren and talking about how they might never have existed but for the Ghost Army. That's what it's all about.
In headlines from around the military, a U.S. battleship is on the water again. The famed battleship New Jersey left its home port in Camden, New Jersey recently to travel to Philadelphia for maintenance and repairs. The New Jersey saw decades of service and battle, beginning all the way back in World War II. Launching on the first anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attacks, it took part in the battles of the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf and supported the invasion of Iwo Jima. The 887-foot-long, 45,000-ton warship also operated in the Korean War and Vietnam and performed missions well into the Cold War. She was decommissioned in 1991 and brought to rest in New Jersey. Local leaders were on hand for the New Jersey's departure for repairs.
There's no battleship in the history of our nation that comes close to the legacy created and lived by the USS New Jersey.
It was a very, very exciting time for anybody to see the mighty ship do its stuff and actually become part of history, to be able to see how she actually works in real life.
The work is expected to take about 2 months. Did you freeze your butt off on an Arctic deployment, sailor? Well, now you're eligible for more recognition for your effort. The Navy is rolling out an Arctic Service Medal in 2024, which will serve as an extension of its existing Arctic Service ribbon. The creation of the medal comes as the Navy has ramped up operations and exercises in the Arctic in recent years, with leaders calling for a strong military presence in the region as global warming opens more waters. Those eligible for the medal are enlisted sailors and officers in the Navy and Marine Corps who were assigned to a unit that conducted an ice-covered strait transit, such as the Bering Strait or Barrow Strait, or a unit that conducted a transit of the North Pole. The first medals will start rolling out later in 2024. And on the defense side of the house, Australia has announced that BAE Systems will build its forthcoming nuclear-powered submarines. The deal is worth about $4.6 billion over 10 years and will see the British company build Virginia-class submarines that house U.S.-designed weapon systems. The backdrop for the deal is the Trilateral Defense Agreement between the U.S., UK, and Australia, known as AUKUS, that is meant to foster nuclear submarine capabilities for the three countries. British and Australian defense leaders toured the Osborne shipyard in Adelaide, Australia at the time of the announcement and talked about the importance of expanding submarine production.
Our submarines and having long-range capable submarines are the single most important military platform that we can bring to bear.
The AUKUS, SSN AUKUS sub, not something that you would normally see done between three different friends, three different partners, a completely new approach to thinking about not just building a submarine, but our global security as well.
Don't go away. When we come back, the Army trains alongside robot counterparts. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. Drones and similar weapons are an ever-increasing part of the modern battlefield, and military officials are always trying to find ways to defeat them. Recently, the Army sent prototypes to the U.S. Central Command Area of Responsibility, where asymmetric attacks are becoming more common. C4ISRNet's Colin Demarest is here with the story.
The U.S. military is testing in Iraq high-energy lasers mounted to Stryker combat vehicles amid ballooning drone attacks on military and commercial assets. The Army sent directed energy prototypes to Central Command earlier this year. The command's boss, General Michael Kurilla, later said troops were experimenting with the futuristic weapons to better understand their application and in advancement of the Army's short-range air defense goals.
We also need to look at not just directed energy as high-powered microwave to be able to go after drone swarms. We do have, the Army is losing its transformation and contact. They've given us 3 50-kilowatt lasers that are Stryker-based that we have inside of Iraq right now. We are experimenting with those and the best and most effective way to use those to help them learn from that to be able to make better systems.
High-energy lasers and related high-power microwave weapons are capable of zapping unmanned vehicles, rockets, and more at a fraction of the cost of traditional munitions. Lasers can fire at the speed of light and burn holes through material, while microwaves can fry electronics en masse. Both types don't need to be manually reloaded, like a rifle or a tank, but are dependent on power generation, which can be disrupted. Directed energy is considered a critical element of what's known as layered defense, having multiple countermeasures ready to thwart different threats in different situations. Testing comes in the wake of a drone attack in Jordan that killed 3 U.S. troops. And nearby, Houthi rebels in Yemen continue to pepper the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden with ballistic missiles and explosive-strapped unmanned vehicles. General Kurilla in the past said he would love to have more lasers and high-power microwaves in the CENTCOM area. Having them on hand, he told Congress, would mean expending fewer missiles, which can cost millions of dollars a pop.
I encourage the Navy to employ directed energy systems. I know there is at least one destroyer, the Preble, I believe, that has a 60-kilowatt Helios. We would welcome being able to bring systems in, but directed energy is not the panacea. It'll be part of a layered defense, and we have to be able to get further out with it to be able to bring down these systems when it's only costing $1 a shot, minus acquisition, to be able to do that. But I would tell you what's worse than shooting $1 million missile at a $20,000 drone is that $20,000 drone hitting a $2 billion ship with 300 sailors on it.
And more from the Futuristic Weapons Department. The Army recently hosted a demonstration of some of its newest capabilities, integrating robotic systems into combat. The capstone event of a month-long exercise known as Project Convergence. The event featured a host of uncrewed systems rolling into a simulated warfare environment. The exercise involved troops from all over the military and included several partner nations, and was partially meant to let those troops experiment with the developing tech. Troops had access to a variety of air and land-based platforms, from robotic vehicles that could launch munitions to self-propelled 50 caliber machine guns.
This is my first time working with HMI. This is them coming for PCC4 to try out some of their new concepts and test out how they want to maybe create the platoon, the different roles within the platoon and the assets they're going to be utilizing. We're here to assist them in trying to shape that concept in a way to make it tactically relevant and help them build some of their SOPs possibly down the line, as well as test some of their concepts as well. Now we're starting to see RTU themselves come from Fort Moore to utilize their assets and train on different tactics as well to see how these different platforms can assist airborne units or armored units in completing their tactical tasks, while also trading blood for steel, as I like to call it, to try and remove the human casualties off the battlefield, but still keeping us in the fight and still accomplishing the mission.
In the urban warfare portion, simulating an assault on a complex of structures, a large drone came first, armed with mortar rounds and smaller drones called robots attached to its belly. Troops then sprung into action. Led by a robotic dog, they fought alongside their robot counterpart, letting the machinery often head out first. The Army says it's on the threshold of being ready to use human-machine integrated units, where drones and robots do everything from lead the charge into buildings to clearing mines. The exercise also contained a medical element, with drone vehicles playing a key role in casualty evacuation. The exercise took place at Fort Irwin, California. When we return, our personal finance expert is back with advice on the importance of teaching financial basics to your kids. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, personal finance expert Jeanette Mack brings you tips on why arming kids with financial knowledge is important and how you can do it.
Experts agree teaching kids to have good financial skills helps them be more successful in life. Kids as early as 6 can grasp the concept and value of money. So by the time they start earning it for themselves, it's important to teach them the habits that will help them achieve their financial goals and become independent. Consider it basic training for their financial lives, like paying bills, managing debt, and saving for the future. Emphasize the critical importance of establishing regular on-time payments like phone bills, utilities, subscriptions, or streaming services. Late payments are damaging to their credit and costly in the long run, so recommend automatic payments to play it safe. These good habits can lead to getting approved for a small loan or a credit card. Taking on debt and repaying can be good as it establishes credit worthiness. Just be sure to stress the need to keep debt to only what's necessary and affordably repaid. Use only 1 or 2 credit cards and don't max them out. Then just keep up the good work. After some time, they'll see the fruits of their good habits and become more confident, financially independent, and prepared for what's ahead.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next week. To get more coverage of military and defense topics, fallout from that PT run, and check out militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more headlines. And to be the most up-to-date paratrooper leaping out of the aircraft, sign up for our Early Bird Brief, compiled each morning to bring you the most up-to-date headlines. And if social media is where you collect open source intelligence, follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and X. And like most junior service members, we're on TikTok, so go find us there as well. Stick around, there's more Defense News Weekly after the break. Coming up, a Medal of Honor recipient's takeaways on the nature of courage. When it comes to courage, no one knows more about it than a Medal of Honor recipient. But it turns out their thoughts on where it comes from and how it can be exhibited are not just related to the battlefield. In the first of our new series titled The Honor Project, Reflections on Courage, Medal of Honor recipient Ryan Pitts talks about his view on the topic and how courage often isn't just generated from within. Check it out.
One thing I'll never forget from that day was just the chaos. I was one of the senior non-commissioned officers there. Myself and Matt Gobble were wounded in the opening moments of the battle. A lot of these kids were 20. Most of them couldn't even buy a beer. And with the 2 leaders down, none of them missed a beat. They just went right to doing their job. These guys continue to stick their hands up over sandbags, jump on top of trucks to try and reload weapon systems in direct view. 49 of us, a lot of guys weren't separated by more than 20 yards, but everybody really only saw their small slice of the pie. Courage to me isn't the absence of fear, it's the ability to move forward in the face of it. Everybody feels it. It's not that it's not there, it's a choice to continue to move forward and do the right thing when maybe everything in your body's telling you not to. I think courage is all around us. We can look at anything from the civil rights movement, the AIDS movement in the 80s, the amount of courage it takes to go against, everybody else thinking something's right when you know that it's not. Peer pressure is not exclusive to younger generations. Sticking up for what you know is right, regardless of the repercussions around you, that's courage. That can even be in your community of sticking up for, maybe it's an underrepresented group or a group that does deserve some support. There's lots of ways that courage can be exhibited in everyday life. Courage can even be exhibited anywhere there's, I think, discomfort. It could be getting to know other cultures. I think one, and I guess I choose to look at it as courage, but I guess it's a little bit of compassion too. When my son was in daycare, they had a new student come into their class who had some physical and mental disabilities. And that can be scary for kids, right? Something that's different. They don't quite know, how to interact. And something that made me really proud as a dad is the teachers relayed to my wife and I later is that day at lunch, and my son left all his peers at his table, and this student had to eat in their assistive device, standing up at a higher point. My son moved his lunch over to eat lunch with this student so that they would feel included in part of the class, and that was something my wife and I always tried to, instill in them. And that was a 4-year-old, 3-year-old kid, kind of exhibiting courage, stepping outside his comfort zone to make somebody else feel included. I think we all feel fear. I've talked about it with the guys that I've served with. We felt fear at different times in combat. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to move forward in the face of it and do the right thing regardless of the odds. It doesn't always just have to come from you, right? You can draw that strength from the people around you, and we can make each other better. I think about that day that I was in the battle and talk about courage. Courage was just guys choosing to do their job, when bullets are falling like raindrops, and everything in your body, however many thousands of years or millions of years of evolution are gonna say, probably flight, not fight in the situation. I think when we look at others and we see the courage that they exhibit, it's something for us to aspire to, because I certainly looked at what those guys that day, and I drew on their courage to be like, despite the fact that I was wounded, let's get back in the fight, this is gonna take all of us. And I think we made each other better.
In other military news, Ukrainian pilots and air crews have been receiving training in advanced fighter jets over in Denmark. Footage from the Danish Defense Command released recently showed what officials said were Ukrainian crews training on F-16s. One of those pilots said the training was beneficial, though their time to learn to fight in the jets was shorter than normal pilot training.
The terms that the duration of the training that we are going through is really short compared to any country training for the F-16 in peacetime. It usually takes a lot more. But we're all somewhat motivated to go back to Ukraine and start fighting those jets. The biggest boost here is not that combat experience, but the motivation to go back and keep fighting.
The footage was said to have come from Skrydstrup Air Base in Denmark. Denmark also recently signed a 10-year security deal with Ukraine, following the UK, Germany, and France.
Today we deliver another strong commitment to Ukraine. As the first Nordic country, we are signing a 10-year agreement on security cooperation. It means a long-term support between Ukraine and Denmark. Other strong partners have already done, and I think we are going to see many strong partners to do exactly the same. I'd like to see our Danish F-16s in the air in Ukraine before summer. I would really like that. And I think with all efforts that is being done and the great cooperation also with other allies, I think we will be ready to ensure that.
And that's all we have time for in this episode. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.